Today on r/ProRevenge. She hated me and made me think I was an idiot. I don't know if this is pro, but it is certainly more than petty. In high school, 10 plus years ago, I was quiet and attentive in class. Teachers liked me. I wasn't popular, but I had good friends. I say all this to explain that high school was relatively calm for me. I played sports, was on the student newspaper, and got decent grades. However, that all changed my second semester junior year. I've always been a voracious reader. My freshman English teacher recommended I move up to the honors English track, so I did for freshman, sophomore, and the first half of junior year. Then I was put into classical literature my second semester junior year. I've always loved Greek and Roman stories, and had already read your typical high school classical reading list on my own. I didn't mind reading them again until I met Ms. Umbridge. She put on a sweet facade, but she was downright evil. She also decided she hated me. I still do not know why, or what transgression I committed, but she hated me. I assume it was my habit of sometimes nodding off in classes. At the time I had undiagnosed thyroid issues and was getting up at 5 a.m. for swim practice. I say sometimes because it happened maybe twice a month total between all 8 classes. I don't remember nodding off in her class, but it could have happened. Anyways, her class was 50% essays and written reports. The rest were random quizzes and a couple tests. I was on the student newspaper, and I was a decent writer. I wasn't worried about maintaining a B or up. We wrote our first paper, and I got a D. I was shocked. The only class I struggled in was chemistry, and still my lowest assignment grade was a C. After class I asked Ms. Umbridge what I did wrong, because her notes were minimal. She told me my assessment of the material was uninspired. Okay, can you direct me to an example of an inspired assessment? Come back during study hall. Thinking she'd have some example materials for me to review, I got a pass to see her during study hall. Nope, quite. She spent the full hour basically telling me I was an idiot. I remember leaving and crying, because she didn't tell me anything constructive. My friend, the eventual valedictorian, offered to help me on my next paper. My friend and I spent hours on my next paper. She never got below an A- on anything. I got another D. My friend was furious. She took it to her AP English teacher and asked him to review it. She said she was entering a writing competition and wanted advice. He said it was great. Her typical A+ work. My friend, quicker on the uptake, asked me for a copy of my original assignment. She asked her AP English teacher to look it over too, and he said she should enter the first one. This one was still good. He'd probably give it an A-, but the other paper was better. My friend was convinced Ms. Umbridge was treating me unfairly for some reason, and she must not like me. My friend wanted me to tell my parents or my school counselor. A teacher didn't like me? That had never happened. Sure, they didn't all love me, but none had actively disliked me. I decided I'd try one more time, but this time get Ms. Umbridge to help me. Despite the previous horrors of spending study hall with Ms. Umbridge, I went to her office during study hall 3 times before the next paper was due. She reviewed the paper and gave me tips on revising it each time. She did this in red pen. I took notes. By the time the next paper was due, I had 3 revised versions with her notes in red ink on each one. I got a D+. She smirked and congratulated me on my improvement. I was done. My friend was right. This B word had it out for me and was giving me bad grades on purpose. I'm a laid-back person, but I was pissed. Never before been this pissed. I took my paper to my newspaper teacher. Sure, he didn't teach English, but our student paper constantly won awards because of his work. I told him I was having trouble in English, and could he please look over my paper and give me advice. He was a little confused as to why I didn't ask my English teacher, but he did it. He also told me it was great, but gave me a few minor changes to make. I asked him if he thought it was a B or better. He said he'd give it an A, not 100%, but a solid A-E. I went to my friend and we brainstormed. I couldn't request a drop or an add. This wasn't college. You just don't switch classes at my high school unless the teacher recommends an honor placement. That's not true, said my friend. The football and basketball guys get moved to easier classes all the time to keep their grades up, so they are eligible for games. The athletics director was a friend of my dad, so I requested a meeting with him and my swim coach after school one day. I told them I was in danger of losing my eligibility to swim because I was pulling a D in a class. I wanted to move classes, but I knew I'd need approval from administration, which I wouldn't get without a good reason. They asked if I had requested help. I explained I had asked for help from multiple people, but my grade wasn't improving. I didn't know what to do. They asked to see my papers. I sat while they read them. They both looked at me confused. Neither of them could understand how those papers were worth only a D. The student VP was brought in. He asked who helped me. I explained my friend. He knew who she was, again future valedictorian, and she had even asked her AP English teacher to look it over for advice. I had also asked my newspaper teacher to help me. Student VP asked if I had ever actually asked my teacher for help. I smiled and handed him the 3 revised versions of paper number 3 with Ms. Umbridge's red ink all over them. He frowned. AP English teacher and my newspaper teacher were pulled into the meeting. They were each asked to grade the papers. All 3 papers got an A- or better. While this was going on, my dad was called in by the athletics director. My dad was pissed. He demanded I be moved to another class, and that Miss Umbridge be put under review. Clearly, she wasn't grading students on their work but on her own personal opinion. The school administration obviously bristled at the accusation that a teacher was treating students unfairly. A lot of arguing that I wasn't allowed to sit on occurred in the VP's office. I could hear plenty of yelling as 6 adult men argued over the appropriate next steps. It was decided that myself, my dad, VP, and athletics director would have a meeting with Ms. Umbridge. Following morning before school, we all met. Ms. Umbridge seemed to think she was going to get to tell everyone why I was so stupid. VP explained that if I maintained a D in her class, I would lose my extracurricular eligibility, and we were all meeting to discuss what to do. She smirked and said I should be moved to the non-honors English track, and I had no business being in honors English. I didn't have the aptitude to understand the complex classical literature they were studying, and I probably would need a tutor to even get through basic English. I've never seen my father so red, and I half expected to see steam come out of his ears. VP asked why she didn't try to help me improve. She said it was up to students to put in the initiative to get better. VP asked if that meant I had never asked her for help. She said I had not. VP then pulled out the 3 revised versions of paper number 3 and handed them to Ms. Umbridge. Now it was her turn to be read. She called me a liar and said those notes weren't hers. Things got heated, and I was asked to leave again. I sat outside the office. This time the secretary was there, and we both heard the shouting. School was set to start in 30 minutes, and they were all just shouting. Then AP English teacher and newspaper teacher were called in again. More shouting. About 5 minutes to the start of classes, the teachers left and I was called back in. If looks could kill, I'd have died then and there when Miss Umbridge walked out of VP's office. I was being moved to basic English effective immediately. My current grade would not carry over. I would not need to make up any past assignments. A new teacher would be instructed to grade me only on the assignments going forward. My new English teacher, Miss Honey, ended up being the English department head. She was at least 65 and had been doing this for decades. After 2.5 years of honors English, this class was easier than PE. I barely had to try to get an A, but I refused to let Miss Honey think Miss Umbridge had been right. I tried harder in that class than any other class that semester. I finished projects so quickly that I was asked to tutor a girl struggling in the class. I spent half the class period just helping this girl understand the material. I helped her go from a C- to a B+. I got something like 104% in the class. At the end of the semester, Ms. Honey called me into her office during study hall. She was recommending I return to honors English for senior year. I must have looked panicked, because she assured me Miss Umbridge would not be my teacher. In fact, she would not be anyone's teacher. She was leaving at the end of the school year. Ms. Umbridge was only in her late 20s and unmarried. Too early to retire. And my high school was in one of the best-paying school districts in the state. I knew what leaving meant, but Miss Honey still explained that I was put in her class on purpose. The school administration trusted Miss Honey to determine the truth of Ms. Umbridge's claim that I was basically a lying idiot. Miss Honey stated I very clearly belonged in honors English. She apologized if her class had not been challenging enough for me. I cried. I mean full-on ugly snot cried. I didn't realize it, but part of me had actually believed Ms. Umbridge up until that moment. Miss Honey hugged me and consoled me. I spent senior year in honors English and spent my study hall tutoring Ms. Honey's struggling students. To this day, I think about that awful woman fairly regularly. My career is strongly writing-based, and I still worry obsessively over my writing. I hope she never taught again because she wreaked havoc on my self-confidence. Our last story for today. A woman let her dog crap on the airport floor. So I crap on her plans. While walking to my gate at LAX, I noticed a woman whose dog was in the middle of doing its business. The woman was loudly FaceTiming with her back to the dog, so I assumed she didn't notice. That was likely the thought shared by the gentleman who tried to get her attention. "Excuse me, miss," he said in a polite tone. The woman glared at him. "Your dog," he sheepishly continued, pointing to the mid-poop pup. The woman rolled her eyes and went back to FaceTime as the man slinked away, seemingly embarrassed. "Some people," she bellowed to her FaceTime companion with no hint of irony, "are just so damned rude." When her dog finished, the woman started walking away, leaving everything right on the airport floor. Another woman tried to stop her. "You're not going to clean that up?" she asked, as shocked as the rest of us were. "They have people for that," the offender replied, disappearing into the crowd, as much as someone yelling into their phone can disappear into a crowd. I stood near the pile and warned people to walk around it while someone else got a maintenance worker's attention. No one said anything. We were so shocked that anyone could be that horrible. When I got to my gate, the woman was there too. Great, we were both going to Tokyo. When I travel abroad, I get embarrassed by other Americans doing things 100 times less embarrassing than leaving animal feces on the floor of an airport. To make it worse, her dog was now barking at everyone who walked by. I have nothing against people flying with their dogs, I do it often. But it is a privilege I take seriously. My dog is well trained and behaves better than most people. He certainly behaves better than that hole. Speaking of holes, there is a pet relief area inside Lax, past security, just 2 gates away from where the party pooper let her dog go to town. It didn't matter, she was the type of person to litter 3 feet from an empty garbage can. While her dog barked at the world, the woman had moved from FaceTiming with no headphones to listening to music with no headphones. I don't like to throw around the word sociopath, but I don't know how else I could explain just how selfish and terrible of a person she was. I'd bet her car was somewhere in long-term parking, parked across 3 spots with paint on the bumper from the child's bike she hit without leaving a note. Everyone else tried to ignore her, sitting as far away from her as they could. I am not everyone else. I sat down right next to the horrible woman. "Are you going to London on business?" I said. "I'm going to Tokyo," she responded gruffly, annoyed that I interrupted her jing. "Oh," I said, "then you better hurry. That flight got moved to gate 53C. This is the flight to London." I figured I could give her a little moment of panic as payback for how terribly she was treating everyone. I didn't predict what would happen next. She grabbed her bags and her dog in a huff, and stormed out of the gate without even checking. She was so self-involved, she didn't notice that the monitor at our gate still said Tokyo and almost everyone at the gate was Japanese. Based on her actions, she believed me that the fight had been moved, so she's also an a-hole for not thanking me. Some people, I thought as I watched her rush away from the gate without stopping her, are just so damned rude. Flight to Tokyo was at gate 69A, so the 53 gates were on the other side of the next terminal. And I felt guilty knowing she probably berated some poor clerk who had to explain to her that there was no gate 53C. I don't know if she made it back to this flight before we took off or not, but I didn't see her board and I don't hear her dog. Her missing her flight was not my original intention, but it would be a fine punishment for her being so rude to everyone and making a low-paid stranger clean feces off the floor. What makes me wonder if I went too far is the knowledge that Delta only has 1 flight to Tokyo each day. Whoops. Maybe she can rebook on another airline. I hear they have people for that. And those are all the stories we have for today. See you tomorrow.